Okay, today I'm going to do a reading from actually the opening of two books, my last two books, which were a duology, not a trilogy, a duology. Um, the first book is A Fading Sun, right there, which came out in July of 2017. Uh, Second one that I'll do will be from A Rising Moon, which came out in November of 2018. So I'm going to just read the opening of both of those books, both of which are still available. So if you like what we read here, feel free to go pick it up. All right. I'm going to start with A Fading Sun since it's the first book. And I'm going to use a little effect on the opening because the ghost opening soliloquy, which is what I'm going to start with, uh, it's a multiple creature. It's not just a single entity. It's a multiple entity, and so I'm going to do an effect just to make that obvious. So here we go in a second. The ghost's opening soliloquy. All right, the ghost's opening soliloquy. Let me get the effect. We knew our names once. We were called. No, those names have mostly vanished, like a school of silver minnows fleeing through the shallows of the river. Strange, we can still remember seeing that, our bare feet visible for a moment through the clear frigid water before they were wrapped in the streamers of mud stirred from the pebbled bottom. And through it all, the metallic flash of the minnows' scales as they evaded our scooping bucket. We remember that. And other times and other lives as well. But our names, something that's so much a part of us that we should hold on to it forever, they're lost as we are. We hear so many thoughts, so many voices inside, and they can't all be ours, can they? We see the world only as through a sheer cloth, with everything obscured and blurred. We set out searching when the last of us died. Now we see you, and we see your mouth moving as if you were talking to us, but your voice is buried along with all the others in our head, and we don't know what you're saying to us. We can't hear you. All we know is that we shouldn't be here. Not if we want to remember, not if we want you to take us in. You shouldn't be here either. We should be there. All of us. There. Chapter 1. The Wraith in the Shadows. The problem with ghosts is that they don't quite realize that they're dead. Vawada entered the temple of Pashtuk, glaring at the muddy tracks of feet on the stone flags. And it was then that she realized she wasn't alone. The ceramic bust of Emperor Pashtuk was illuminated in the sun, slanting down from the open roof above the altar in the middle of the room. The pair of east-facing open windows also allowed in shafts of dust-speckled light, creating heavy shadows around the remainder of the circular room. What had once been a temple not dedicated to Emperor Pashtuk, but to Aliyah. Vawada noticed the ghost, what her people, the Kateni, would call a toicha, as a shimmering, nearly transparent presence in the shadows. When it passed through sunlight, the apparition vanished entirely. It paced the room's perimeter as if it could not bear to keep still. Vawada thought the wraith a woman, though its face shifted and changed in the light, unlike any toicha she'd seen before. Its eyes were always on Vawada, and its mouth moved, as if it were trying to speak to her. Vawada almost imagined that she could hear sibilant words, but that might have been the wind that tossed the leaves outside the temple. Vawada set down the heavy wooden bucket of water and rags with a grateful sigh as water sloshed over the leather of her boots. She rubbed at her back to ease the kink there, the ache that had been present ever since the birth of her second child, her son, a decade ago now. When the ghost passed near her, Vawada reached out to it and felt a winter cold as her hand passed through its body. The ghost stared at her, its features dim and difficult to read. "Who are you?" Vawada asked the ghost. "I've helped others trapped like you before. How can I help you?" The creature only gave a doleful shake of its head and continued pacing the room. The temple had once been the temple of Aaliyah, the goddess whose visage was the sun. Vawada's great-grandparents and their family had served Aaliyah as Dree, those who could wield, if the old tales could be believed, the magic of Aaliyah and the sun paths that coalesced here in the building, and they'd also been Monach, clerics of Aaliyah. The sun paths were still marked on the floor, pale tiles set against the darker marble, and two diagonals that crossed where the altar sat and ended at the four great windows that framed the solstices, dawn and sunset. But those days were dust in legend since the arrival of the Mandoa, and the statue of Aaliyah that had once graced the altar had been taken by Vawada's grandparents from the altar and hidden when the Mandoa had come, because they knew that the Mandoa would simply smash the figure and melt down its golden crown. Vawada knew where Aaliyah's statue was buried. Her grandparents had told her mother, and she had told Vawada. To Vawada, this was still as much Aaliyah's temple as Pashtuk's, despite Emperor Pashtuk's dour and serious image replacing that of Aaliyah. Vawada had to admit that the Mandoan sculptors were superior to those of the Kateni. One could almost imagine Pashtuk's eyes blinking or his mouth opening. But for now, he only stared blindly at Vawada and the ghost. "I can show you the sun path," Vawada said to the Toicha, pitching her voice so that it echoed in the round chamber, shimmering as the words rebounded from the curve of the roof. "You can still find it. I've shown others." The ghost seemed to wail silently at that, its mouth open in an "oh" that echoed the central opening in the temple's roof, and Vawada saw its head shake violently. It pointed emphatically northward. Not to the windows that framed the solstice suns, dawn and sunset, the sun paths that led to the plain of the Kateni gods when this had been Eliah's place of worship. The absent gods now, the forgotten gods for most, the forbidden gods. "I don't know what you want if you won't follow the sun path," Vawada said. "I wish I could talk to you. I wish you could hear me. Perhaps my Shunavar Elias could have done that. She knew all the spells." In answer, the ghost pointed northward again, imperiously, then continued its pacing. Vawada watched it, then sighed. She knelt down alongside the bucket of water and wrung out the rags there. She began mopping the stone flags around the altar, marveling at the hollows worn into the golden-brown stones by generations of feet. The ghost watched her, still restless. When Vawada had finished her task, a few candle stripes later, she put the rags back in the twice-refilled bucket and stood, groaning and rubbing at her knees. The ghost had stopped, standing directly in front of her. Vawada could see the temple doors through its body, as if she peered through a thin morning fog. The features hovering in front of her remained indistinct and genderless. "I'm leaving now," she told it. "I'm sorry. I wish you would let me help you." Once more, the ghost lifted a pale arm and pointed northward. Vawada hefted the bucket. As she did so, she saw movement at the door, blurred by the ghost. "Vawada?" a deep voice called. "Mir," she answered. "Sorry, I was just getting ready to leave." She took a step toward her husband, shivering as she passed near the ghost's frigid presence. Older than her by decades, Mir's hair was now largely silver white, with his scalp gleaming through the thin strands at the top and back of his head. His breathing after climbing the hill to the temple was harsh and loud, as it was too often lately whenever he exerted himself. Even his short walk seemed to exhaust him now. Mir wore Mandoan clothing, loose pantaloons and a vest dyed the rich blue of an administrator as befitted his role as the hand of Pencraig, with a simple white linen tunic underneath. Vawada noticed that the servants hadn't properly polished his boots this morning. There were still traces of mud from yesterday's rain. For her part, Mir was wearing clothing that her grandparents would have found familiar, in the style of the Kiteni, who were both her and Mir's people. A chiton, which the Mundoa scoffingly called a bog dress, a woolen wrap in brown and ivory plaid, embroidered with elegant, brightly colored knotwork around the neck and hem, the cloth belted and pinned around her body. Her long reddish-brown hair was wound in intricate braids, with the end of each braid held by a small gilded ball. The thought of how they looked together, so vastly different, amused Voada suddenly. She gave Mir a smile, then peered back into the room toward the ghost. "Thank you for cleaning the temple for tomorrow," Mir said. He was still breathing heavily, leaning over and bracing himself against the railing around the altar. In the heavily shadowed temple, his blue eyes seemed more gray to Voada. "I'll send Orla up to the Voice's estate. That way, Voice wife Dalara will know that she can have her slaves bring in the flowers and decorations for the Emperor Pashduk's celebration tomorrow." Voada shook her head slightly at her husband's misunderstanding. She watched the ghost, which had resumed pacing, glinting in the shadows, lost in the sun. "I didn't do it to impress Voice wife Dalara," she said. "I only thought Elia deserved a clean home, and the temple was getting filthy. The Voice wife doesn't have her people take care of this place as they should." "This isn't Elia's temple," he reminded her. "It hasn't been now for 3 generations." "Really?" Voada answered gently. It was an old argument between them, the lines as deeply worn as a rutted road, so they didn't even have to speak them now. Instead, she watched the ghost moving in and out of the light. "What are you looking at?" Mir asked, still leaning on the railing. "Is there—" "Yes," she told him. "I don't see anything." "I know, but that doesn't mean it's not there. I can see it." "Can you make this one go away like the others?" "I tried to show it the sun path, but it ignored me." Mir gave a grunt as he pushed himself upright, and Voada knew that meant the conversation was over. She hefted the bucket and turned. "Come on," she said to Mir, taking his arm. "Let's go home." And that's the opening of A Fading Sun. And I think I've changed my mind. I think what I'll do to keep things a little shorter so that I'm not giving you a half an hour or more of reading at a time here, what I'll do is read the opening to A Rising Moon tomorrow and post that. So this is the opening to A Fading Sun. And tomorrow I'll give you the opening from A Rising Moon. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to subscribe right down there and pick up the book because it's still out there. And I'd love for you to pick it up and read it and let me know what you think of it. So I will talk to you later. Tomorrow, as a matter of fact. Goodbye.